Greetings. I would have had a video up sooner, but see, today's my Friday, and when I get home from work on my Friday, my body says, "Hey, you don't work tomorrow. Let's go ahead and catch up on some sleep, shall we?" So I ate and I passed out. Spent 3 hours of sleep in very uncomfortable, half sitting, half laying position on hats, and yeah, it. As soon as I woke up, one of the cats jumped down on my lap and looked at me like, "Are you okay?" It's like it's Bear. Okay. I'm gonna do kind of a combined thing here. One of the comments I read yesterday or a couple days ago was to look back at the 2012 draft. Is it long enough back to look back at the 2012 draft and say, okay, who hit it out of the park and who didn't? And I think it's relatively decent period of time. In 4 years, the guys who are really going to make it and be premier players will have made it. And the guys who aren't going to make it will have been exposed as the guys who aren't going to make it. For the most part. I mean, there's still guys who, have a shot, but it's a lot it's a lot harder to predict they're going to be better than average when they take more than 4 years. All right. First off, I'm going through the Sports Forecaster from 2012-2013. I also lined up the yearbooks I bought last year and thought, well, maybe I can do one on what the best yearbook is to buy, but that's for another time. Going to 2012-13, top rookies at the center position for them. Jonathan Hubert, he will need polishing and good line mates before he makes an impact in the NHL, but he's capable of being called a race. Mika Zibanejad. Zibanejad owns fantastic wheels and plays the game with swagger. He's quite raw, so he's probably a year away from big numbers. Brandon Peary with the Blackhawks. He's a bit undersized, but very cerebral, especially with the puck. Peary may be the solution to Chicago's second line pivot hole. And of course, you look back now, and Peary is out at this stage. Casey Cizikas with the Islanders, despite his solid 11-12 AHL numbers, 45 points in 52 games, Cizikas is likely to play as a bottom six forward at least to start. I would say he's entrenched as a bottom six forward now. Number 5, Peter Holland of the Ducks. The Ducks like Holland's upside, but he will probably start the season in the NHL. Is he their second line center of the future? See, of the future, that's the kiss of death. Absolutely kiss of death. Goalie of the future, second line of the future, dominant defenseman of the future. As soon as I say that, it's over. Wingers, top rookies, Michael Granlund, one of the truly elite NHL prospects, is now ready to take North America by storm. Expect Granlund to make an impact in 12-13. I would say his stats have been underwhelming compared to what was expected of him before he reached the NHL. Number 2, Nail Yakupov. There should be a few growing pains in 12-13, but also several flashes of offensive brilliance from Keeper League stud Yakupov. Yakupov's rookie season was actually pretty good. It was what followed that showed a trend downwards. Sven Baertschi. Don't be surprised if Baertschi is among the Calder Trophy candidates this season. He has great fantasy upside going forward. Chris Kreider, the Rangers. There is much to like about Kreider. Size, speed, and a deadly wrist shot. However, he has been hyped a lot, so don't overrate. Yeah, you'll rate him behind Baertschi and Yakupov. Makes total sense, guys. And number 5, Vladimir Tarasenko. There will be an NHL adjustment period for Tarasenko, especially under strict defensive system. He's a major talent, though. I don't know why they put him at 5 then. Defenseman, top 5. Number 1, Brendan Smith. Despite limited NHL time last season, Smith saw healthy power play minutes and has produced strong all-around stats at every level. 2, Dougie Hamilton with the Bruins. Well, they didn't keep him. With nothing left to prove in junior hockey, Hamilton will get every opportunity to stick with the big club. Keep an eye on him. I know he wanted a lot of money and the Bruins didn't want to pay him, but they should have paid him. Number 3, Justin Schultz. Schultz boasts tremendous keeper league fantasy value, but he'll also likely put up pretty good numbers as a rookie in 12-13. Tyson Barrie. In a few years, Barrie could emerge as a fantasy stud from the back end. For now, he'll be an interesting rookie fantasy option. Matt Donovan of the New York Islanders. Donovan has good offensive tools and got some power play time and limited NHL duty, so he has real sleeper upside for 12-13. And in goal, number 1, Jakob Markstrom with the Panthers. While the Panthers are trying to be patient with their goaltender of the future, Markstrom may already be too good to keep down. 2, Richard Bachman of the Stars. At 25, he's nearing the age when many goalies figure things out in the NHL. He may not be a starter, but he's a dark horse. And I'm surprised Bachman hasn't had more of a chance at the NHL level than he has to this stage. His stats have been good. He's been okay. He's been a good number 3 option. I'm just surprised nobody's given him a real shot at number 2. Robin Lehner with the Senators, though he has Craig Anderson and Ben Bishop ahead of him. Lehner's puck-stopping ability will get him to the big league soon. 4, Matt Hackett. Clearly, Hackett is the goaltender of the future in Minnesota now. Kiss of death. However, he'll need to continue to bide his time in the NHL. Yeah, he's still down there because he's the goalie of the future. Number 5, Leland Irving. Alberta native has some upside, so he's become an intriguing handcuff for all Mika Kiprusoff fantasy owners in 12-13. I'm sorry, the goalie of the future thing just drew me off here. Okay, I'm not going to go through the prospects because that's going to take too long. But I'll go through the draft. Okay, so Anaheim's draft in 2012. They draft Hampus Lindholm, first round, number 6. He was the 4th rated European, so I would consider that a home run. To get him at number 6 and not have traded down where they probably could have got him. Nicholas Kurdiles hasn't really played yet. Frederik Andersen, of course, is the goaltender now for the Leafs. He was actually a re-entry into the draft, drafted at 87th overall, so that's a good bargain. Kevin Roy hasn't made it yet. It is Roy because he's from the U.S. Andrew O'Brien, Brian Cooper, Kenton Helgeson, and Jacob Megna. So Helgeson, I think, is still in the Anaheim system. All right, Boston. Number 2012 in the 2012 draft, 24th overall, they draft Malcolm Subban. The jury's out on whether or not Subban's an NHL goalie. For me, anyways. I know he's still considered the goalie of the future in Boston, but I don't know. Why do you bring back Khudobin then? I look at it and I say, if Boston's brass has confidence in Malcolm Subban, why isn't he the start? Why isn't he the backup this year? Khudobin doesn't sign to come back from the KHL to go to the American Hockey League. So, Matthew Grzelcyk, doesn't really matter. He was rated 177th in North America, and the Bruins drafted him 85th. Go Bruins. Seth Griffith was not rated. They drafted him at 131st. I'll say that's a bit of a steal, since he's borderline NHL. And then Cody Payne, Matthew Benning, and Colton Hargrove. Haven't heard anything out of those guys. Buffalo with the number 12 draft pick, draft the 3rd-rated North American prospect in Mikhail Grigorenko. Doesn't really matter how I pronounce it because he's now with Colorado, and he really hasn't become very, very good. Zemgus Girgensons was drafted 14th overall, but he was the 18th rated North American, so he was a bit of a stretch to grab at that point in the draft. But he's been a pretty good player, and he's got a lot of upside. He does. He has a lot of upside. At 44th overall, the 47th rated North American player Jake McCabe is drafted. McCabe is, looks like he's going to be an everyday NHLer, whether it's 5th and 6th or 3rd and 4th, who knows. And then Justin Kia, Logan Nelson, Linus Allmark was drafted in the 6th round, so that's a steal because he's already had a year as a backup. Brady Austin was drafted in the 7th round. I've kind of followed him a little bit. They had a special on him I think it was on TSN, and his play with Belleville and some perceived issues that drove him down in his draft ranking. So, I kind of kept up with him for a couple years. I haven't paid much attention in the last year. Judd Peterson was the last draft pick for Buffalo. All right, Calgary. In the 1st round, the 43rd ranked North American prospect, drafted at 21st overall, Mark Jankowski. And whether you agree with Jankowski or not, I'm not sure why you'd agree with Jankowski, to be completely honest. Unless there's something I'm not seeing in his stats, I don't know that he ever plays for Calgary. Patrick Seeloff, of course, he was traded in the offseason. He was 31st ranked, drafted at 42nd. John Gillies, drafted 75th overall. Do they mention him in their top prospects? No. They have Jankowski as a project, though. Then Brett Kulak, Ryan Culkin, Coda Gordon, and Matthew DeBlau. And Coda Gordon, Ryan Culkin were guys I followed for a bit because in NHL 12 they actually became like stud players, especially Coda Gordon. I don't know why. I had numerous franchises and he became like fantastic. I'm like, who the hell is this Coda Gordon kid? But NHL 12 is like that. Every draft pick you got became like another superstar in the NHL. As long as you kept them. As long as you kept them and you played them in the NHL, they became super. Fantastic. I miss NHL 12. Let's see. Carolina. Drafting 38th overall. They didn't have a first rounder that year. 22nd rated North American. Phil Giuseppe. Brock McGinn was drafted after that. Then Daniel Altschuler. Then Erik Karlsson. Not that Erik Karlsson. Trevor Carrick was drafted in the 4th round. Jacob Slavin was drafted in the 4th round. You got to consider that a bit of a... Or Slavin. You have to consider that a bit of a steal because he's now one of the regular defensemen. Brendan Woods, Colin Olson, and Brandon Collier. Chicago Blackhawks. Drafting at 18th overall, Teuvo Teravainen, 2nd rated European. Of course, they traded him in the offseason. They had to. Dylan Fernier was drafted in the 2nd round. Then Chris Callan, Garrett Ross, Trevor Brown, Vincent Hinostroza, Brandon Whitney, and Matt Tompkins. Other than Teravainen, there's not a whole lot there. But Chicago's like that, though. Chicago, part of how they got to where they are is Taves and Kane were high draft picks, and then they just had lots of draft picks after that. So if you have lots of draft picks, the odds of getting a hit, they go up. The Islanders did that too. Just get as many draft picks as possible. Isn't that right, Vancouver? Oh, wait, never mind. Vancouver doesn't count because they don't keep draft picks. They trade them, and then people tell me that's not important. And it's like, it is. If you're rebuilding and you want to go somewhere, you stockpile draft picks. Because odds are most of them aren't going to make it. All right, so Colorado, they draft their first round draft pick they traded. They get Mitchell Hurd, Troy Burke, Michael Clark, Joseph Blandisi, and Colin Smith. So that's Colorado. The Blue Jackets, drafting 2nd overall, they draft Ryan Murray. Fantastic pick. Oscar Dansk was the 2nd round pick, 2nd rated European goalie. Was considered a safe pick at the time, and I was very happy with Dansk as a pick. But he really hasn't developed. But then they made up for it in the 3rd round when they drafted Jonas Korpisalo, who looks to be their backup. Josh Anderson, Daniel Czar, and then Gianluca Curcarudo. And then Dallas. Let's get into Dallas here. Come on, Dallas. Drafted 13th overall, 7th rated North American, Radek Faksa. Faksa's become a pretty damn good bottom 6 player. And I like that draft pick now. I didn't like it for a couple years after it was made. Ludwig Bystrom, Mike Winther, Devin Shore, Issa Lindell, Gemel Smith, Brendan Truk, Henry Cavill, and then Dmitry Sinitsyn. So, yeah, there's a lot of maybes there. Issa Lindell may turn out to be a steal later, but there's a lot of, Detroit drafted 20th North American, 49th overall, Martin Frk. And I wanted Frk to make it because his last name's FRK, and I like a name without a vowel. I think that takes a lot of guts. Jake Peterson, he's still potentially their backup. Athanasiou was drafted in the 4th round. Got to consider him a steal now. Michael McKee, James DeHaas, and Rasmus Bowden was drafted 200th overall. So the magic that Detroit had at one point, they don't have it now. They don't. The Detroit Magic in the later rounds has kind of disappeared because every team now does European scouting, and every team knows who the hidden gems are for the most part, and every team has their own hidden gems. Edmonton, first draft pick, Nail Yakupov, then Mitchell Morris, Juhar Kara, Daniel Zarkov, Eric Gustafson, not that Eric Gustafson, a different Eric Gustafson, Joey Lalegia, doesn't matter. John McCarron was drafted in the 6th round. So after the 1st round, as normal for an Edmonton draft, it doesn't really go anywhere. Florida, Michael Matheson, Stephen Hodges, Alexander Delnov, Francis Beauvillier, Jonathan Nielsen. So Mike Matheson, drafted 23rd overall, at this point looks like a pretty damn good pick. The Kings, drafting 30th overall, Tanner Pearson, who was an overager, and I remember there was some talk about that at the time, and he's actually turned out to be a pretty damn good player. So drafting overagers isn't always a bad thing. Nikolai Prokorin, Colin Miller, 5th round draft pick. He's with Boston now. Thomas Hika, Paul Ledoux, Nick Ebert. Ebert's one I've been following as well. He is now Dallas Stars property. Thank you for taking Jack Campbell off of our hands, Kings. We will reward you handsomely when we win the cup. And not because Nick Ebert's on the team, though. Minnesota, Matt Dumba was drafted 7th overall. He was the 11th ranked North American. Raphael Bessiere, John Drager, Alan Gilmore. It's spelled different than Darren Drager. Daniel Gunnarsson, Christoph Berchi, spelled different than the Berchi in Calgary, now in Vancouver. And Lou Nanny, drafted 188th overall. I believe he's the great nephew of the Lou Nanny from the olden days, or grandson, one or the other. Montreal drafted Alex Galchenyuk at 3rd overall. Can you imagine if Edmonton had drafted Galchenyuk? I mean, it would have been controversial at the time, but my God, they would have looked like geniuses right now. Sebastian Kohlberg at 33rd overall. Then Dalton Thrower, who's still developing. Tim Boson, Brady Vale, Charles Hudon, and then Eric Nystrom. Different Eric Nystrom. This was the draft where guys who had the same name as players who were already in the NHL happened. Nashville. Pontus Aberg, it doesn't matter. Drafted 37th overall. Yeah. Anyway, Colton Sissons, drafted 50th overall. He was the 14th rated North American. Drafted in the 3rd round, Jimmy Vesey, who was actually rated 77th out of North Americans. Yeah. Yeah, and he has become actually a pretty darn solid prospect who should hopefully end up in Boston. Brandon Leipsic was rated 114th overall, drafted 89th. He's now Toronto property. Zachary Steppen, Mikko Vananen, Simon Fernholm, Max Gortz, and then Marek Mazanik was drafted in the 6th round. So Nashville had a really good draft that year. They did. New Jersey, Stefan Matteau was drafted 29th overall. Damon Severson was drafted in the 2nd round, 60th overall. Ben Johnson, not the runner, was drafted in the 3rd round. Ben Thompson in the 4th round. Hello, Mr. Thompson. Graham Black in the 5th round. Alexander Kerfoot. Arturs Gavrus was drafted in the 6th round. Homer Simpson would have to be the... Hello, Mr. Thompson. I'm tapping my foot on the floor when I say that. Anytime I hear the name Thompson, I was, hello, Mr. Thompson. And I pat. Anyway, it doesn't matter. The Islanders drafted Griffin Reinhart at 4th overall. I'll go ahead and say that looks like it was a mistake right now. At 34th overall is Ville Polka, who is now Chicago property. Adam Pellich in the 3rd round. Loke Leduc, Doyle Summerby, Jesse Graham, and Jake Bischoff. No relation. 7th round. 147th ranked overall. The New York Rangers. And on the Rangers page, there you go, guys. I always have people talking about the Rangers Winter Classic. There it is. It is a sharp jersey, although I don't know how you can love that jersey and hate the 70s Rangers jersey with that same coat of arms on the front. I think you're hating on the coat of arms just to hate on something. New York Rangers, Brady Shay, drafted 28th overall. We'll see this year whether or not he was first-round material, because he should be with the team. Boo Nieves, Cristobal, but it's Boo is the nickname, and I think Boo Nieves is what he's going by now. Drafted 59th overall, Callie Anderson, and then Thomas Spelling. No relation. I don't think he's any relation to Tori Spelling anyways. Ottawa Senators, drafted 15th overall. They drafted Cody Ceci. Great draft pick. Chris Driediger, still potentially their backup at some point. Jared Maidens, sad story that one. Drafted in the 3rd round, and I thought with a great name like Jared Maidens, I thought this kid's going to be a steal. And then last time I checked, he's out of hockey, so that's too bad. Timothy Boyle, Bayarjian. I wish I was French so I could pronounce that properly. I think I'd have to rip my tongue out and turn it backwards. Francois Broussard. I guess Francois Broussard didn't work out as a goaltender, so they drafted a different Broussard. Maybe they had a jersey put aside and like, we need to get this Broussard jersey. Well, we could just grab Derek Broussard. Yeah, but then he has to play goal. We'll deal with that later. And then Michael Wickstrand in the 7th round, and I think he's still in their system. So it's interesting when a 7th rounder has a potential to make a team. Philly, drafting 20th overall, draft Scott Lawton, and then Anthony Stollers. Stollers is still in their system, I believe. And then in the 3rd round, some kid named Gostisbehere. He's probably not going to make it. I've never heard of him. I'm kidding. But 5'11", 160, 148th ranked North American. Let's go ahead and give Philly the draft, because that's a fantastic pick for an undersized defenseman in a league that doesn't respect defensemen under 6'2" anymore. And here is Philly in the 3rd round, where you still can get solid prospects, hitting one out of the park with Gostisbehere. Frederick Larson, no relation, I assume, to any of the Larsons anywhere. There's Larsons everywhere. Taylor Lyer, Reese Wilcox, and Valery Vasilyev. The Phoenix Coyotes, and they were Phoenix here. 75th ranked North American goes 27th overall. It's Henrik Samuelsson, Jordan Martiniuk, James Melindy, Rhett Holland, Nicholas Tikkanen. It's spelled different, so I'm going to assume it's not related. Samuel, oh boy, Fejes. I'm going to try that. Merrick Langhammer and Justin Hash in the 7th round. So, Pittsburgh, drafting 8th overall, Derek Pouliot, and in 22nd overall, Oli Mata. I remember watching the draft, seeing Pittsburgh get those guys, and just saying out loud to my TV, this isn't fair. This isn't fair that they're getting both of these guys, because I felt both players were going to be really solid NHL defensemen from what I'd seen of their prospect biographies. And Matt had been rated the number 8 prospect. So the fact that he fell to 22nd, I thought was unfair. And it just showed that Pittsburgh gets damn lucky at the draft table. Theodore Bluger was drafted in the 2nd round. Well, they couldn't hit them all out of the park, but in the 3rd round they drafted Oscar Sundqvist. And in the 3rd round they drafted Matt Murray. Holy crap. And then in the 4th round they drafted Mattia Marcantuoni, Sean McGuire in the 4th round, Clark Seymour, and then Anton Zlobin in the 6th round. But man, 3 NHL players 4 NHL players in the first 3 rounds. That's fantastic. So maybe I'll take the draft back from Philly and give it to Pittsburgh. St. Louis, just Jordan Schmaltz at 25th overall. That's a home run because he'd been rated 34th overall. Samuel Kirker, Mackenzie McEachern. Wow, that's a handful of letters for a name. Colton Parayko was drafted in the 3rd round. He was not even rated, so that I'll give them a win. He was Fort McMurray out of the Alberta Junior League, so that's a home run. Nicholas Walters, Francois Tremblay, Pettery Lindbaum, and Tyrell Seaman. No relation. I don't know who. San Jose, drafting 17th overall, they draft Thomas Hertl. Chris Tierney was then drafted at 55th overall, and he was rated 118th. So let's go ahead and give him a win there. Chris Lalancette, Daniel O'Regan, Clifford Watson, and then Joakim Ryan in the 7th round. Tampa, drafting 10th overall. They go off the board a bit with 23rd rated Slater Cuckoo. Then 19th overall, they draft Vasilevsky, the number 1 rated European goaltender. Dylan Blue Juice was drafted in the 2nd round. Love that name. I still love the name Blue Juice. I want to see him in the NHL badly. Regular NHL. Brian Hart, Tanner Richard, Cedric Paquette was drafted in the 4th round. That's a win. Jake Dotchin, and then Nikita Gusev in the 7th round. Toronto Maple Leafs. What jersey was that? Well, that's their 67th throwback. They've had a lot of jerseys. Toronto's had a lot of jerseys over the last 15 years. The 12 draft, drafting 5th overall, the 5th rated North American, Morgan Riley. 2nd round, Matt Finn. And then in the 5th round, Dominic Toninato. Connor Brown was drafted in the 6th round. That looks like it's a home run at this point. Wait, there's a movie coming out from the creators of The Evil Dead? Don't breathe. Sorry. There's this trailer, and I haven't seen a really good horror movie in a long time. All right. Ryan Rupert was drafted in the 6th round. I followed Rupert for that NHL 12 reason. NHL 12 Rupert became a stud of a centerman. He's now Ottawa farmhand material. Victor Louvre was drafted in the 7th round. Vancouver Canucks, drafting 25th overall or 26th overall, draft Brendan Gaunce. Gaunce looks like a good 4th-line player, but he's never going to be much more than that. Alexander Mallet drafted in the 2nd round, and that was when all Canucks fans went, what? Because here was an overager who was not rated, and nobody saw this guy as making the Canucks, and he is an unrestricted free agent on his way out of hockey right now. Then in the 5th round, Ben Hutton, followed by Wesley Myron, and then Matthew Beattie. But Ben Hutton in the 5th round is a huge win. He was rated 200th among North Americans. Washington, at 11th overall, drafts Philip Forsberg. How's he doing for the Caps anyways? And then at 16th overall, they draft Tom Wilson, Chandler Stevenson, Thomas DePauli, Austin Wolfrich. Connor Carrick was drafted in the 4th round. Or 5th round, Riley Barber, Christian Juice, one of the greatest names in the history of hockey, Janan Rissling, and then Sergei Kostenko in the 7th round. Christian Juice is a fantastic NHL name. I thought Juice was an amazing name back in the 80s, 90s, but Christian Juice is even better. I don't know if they're related or not. I've never looked into it. And Winnipeg Jets, finally. We're drafting 9th overall. Winnipeg drafts Jacob Trouba. Then in the 2nd round, Lucas Suter, then Scott Kosmachuk. But in the 5th round, they got Connor Hellebuck, which makes you wonder, why don't teams draft goalies sooner? But he was not rated, so I guess Winnipeg knew he'd still be there later. Ryan Olsen drafted in the 6th round. And then Jamie Phillips, a goaltender, drafted in the 7th round. So there you go. There's the draft. Keep track of where your team drafted, how they did. That draft, though, to me, it's Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh wins that draft hands down. Anyways, that's it for a look back at the 12-13 rookies and the 2012 draft.